Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Redneck Racing. Today's episode is going to be a really exciting one. We're going to be putting together the motor for the 66 Skylark. So as you can see behind me here, we have all the parts, or most of the parts necessary to put the engine together. We got the pistons and the crankshaft on the floor over there. And yeah, we're going to be getting right into this. The first thing we're going to do is put the crankshaft in and the camshaft, and then check the bearing tolerances on the crankshaft. So we're going to get right into all that. So one quick tip here that I'm sure a lot of people know is if you put the camshaft in before the crankshaft, you can kind of help guide the camshaft in as it goes through with your other hand. It just makes putting the whole camshaft in a lot easier. You don't need one of those fancy tools out in the front to guide the whole thing through. And then what I'm doing for this cam is I'm using some of the this STP oil treatment. I got it from O'Reilly's. I'm just letting it heat up right now because it's pretty cold out here, and that stuff was almost a solid. It did not want to pour out of the jar. So yeah, it's just a zinc additive. I typically put a bottle of that in after I change the oil in the Camaro, and it works pretty good for just an assembly lubricant as well. So I'll be using that stuff on all the cam journals and the lobes, and then I'll also be putting it on the bearings for the crankshaft and for the pistons. So that's kind of the plan for right now. I'm probably going to put a lot of this together off camera. You guys have seen us put a lot of motors together, so next time you see this thing, there'll be pretty much the whole bottom end will be put together. Oh, and one other thing, I did get some Plastigauge. I'm just going to Plastigauge one main journal and one rod journal just to make sure that the bearings are right. They should be. The crankshaft hasn't been ground other than just a little bit of polishing I did, and I got standard size bearings, so everything should fit together just fine. One quick thing that I want to mention here before I go any farther with this. When me and Peter first started putting together small block Chevy, as we were saying in our videos, once you get the main caps on, don't spin the crankshaft around, because it'll wipe all the juice that you put on the bearings off. But you want to at least spin it around once fully, just to make sure nothing binds up. Because I remember when we were putting Peter's motor together, we had this cam retainer plate in there, and the bolt was actually too long, and it was rubbing on the counterweight right in here. And the only reason we found that problem out is because I was being nosy and spun the crankshaft around. So you probably want to do that at least once, just to make sure everything is, spinning nicely in there. And speaking of the cam retainer plate, I've heard a couple people say on forums and whatever, and I'm sure some people know this, but I'm putting it in here just because anyways. It's always a good idea to replace these because, as you can see in here, there's actually a gasket. So this piece would fall into replacing all the gaskets, and it actually holds oil pressure in the two main oil galleys that run through the lifters. So if this gasket goes bad, your top end isn't going to get any oil, and then you're going to have a lot of valve train problems. So you want to replace this plate just as nice insurance. I think it's like $10, and it comes with new screws and everything. One other thing I'm doing real quick here before I put these pistons in is I'm popping the top and the second ring off, the compression ring and the wipe ring basically, to just gap them a little bit. They're already pretty wide. I think this one is at 25 when I started, and I'm just gonna gap everything at 28,000. So I got a 20 and an 8, and I've got a super high-tech ring filing tool right there. And then yeah, I'm using the piston to square it in the bore and checking the gap. So here's my 20 and my 8. It might actually be a little over 28. That's alright. We'll take it. for the boost side of things. Like anything between about 28 and 30, I'm going to be good with for any of them. I don't think it really even matters which one has more gap, the top or the bottom. I've seen people say, oh, the top one should have more gap because it's closer to the combustion, it's going to get hotter, or the bottom one should have more gap because the top one should have less gap because that's the one sealing it, and then the bottom one doesn't really matter, so just go extra safe on that one. The way I see it, they should both just be the same, I guess. So I'm going to run 28 thousandths, and that should be good for like 20 something pounds of boost. I probably won't be able to run 30 pounds of boost through it, but the stock pistons won't take 30 pounds of boost before I just straight up melt a hole in them anyways, so that doesn't really even matter. Alright, all the rings have been gapped. I really only had one ring that I had to open up a lot. All the top rings I did have to adjust a little bit. Only one bottom ring had to get touched, and that one, it was right at about 28 thousandths, and I kind of just gave it a little touch with the file. And then one of the top rings was probably at like 18 to 20 thousandths to start off with. All the other ones were right around 25 or 26 thousandths to begin with. So this whole process really went very quickly. Honestly, I probably could have left them all alone, except for that one, so it's a good thing I did check them. And I got that one ring filed down, and the other ones are all good. Honestly, most of the bottom ones are probably closer to 30 thousandths. That 28 thousandths fit in very easily. So yeah, now we're going to start putting the pistons in. I got a dingle ball hone in all the cylinders. I got the deck buzzed off with a little Scotch-Brite burr on a die grinder. So hopefully everything will go together good at this bottom end. I got new bearings for this, same as the main journals. The bearings that I'm using are just the cheapo ones from Michigan Motorsports. So they're not cheapo bearings, but they're the cheapest ones that Michigan Motorsports had. So nothing fancy or crazy or anything like that. I did plastic gauge the main journals, and it was pretty tight. It was like 1.5 thousandths, so that's pretty much as tight as you want to go with bearing clearance. But I think what I'll probably do is just use the stock oil pump, and that should give me plenty of oil pressure. So the bearings they give pretty tight clearances, but that's all right. So the engine build continues here. All the pistons are in. Everything basically on the bottom end is done now. We got the rear cover is on but not torqued, because I can get a torque wrench in here with this engine staying in the way. Got the front cover on. The oil pump is on. Everything, timing chain, everything on the front is done. The balancer still needs to get torqued down, which I can't do until I get a flex plate on the back to hold the engine still. One tip I'm going to give for getting these little stinking grommets in here, those things are a pain in the butt. They went into the valley cover nice, but then you try and put the valley cover on, they really get stuck. And what I found out is maybe they're only giving me problems because it's like 25 degrees in the shed right now. So what I did is I just held the valley cover up by the heater for about 2 minutes and let them get real nice and squishy, and then they just popped right on. That might not be a problem if you have a nice heated shop that's always heated. Or maybe that is just a problem. You might need to get like a torch, or I don't know. It worked really nice for me because this engine block is really cold and I just warmed the rubber up there. But anyways, that's just maybe something to help somebody out getting, if you're replacing the grommets in there like I did. Next thing that's going in the motor is going to be the lifters. So what I've got here is Morel lifters from Michigan Motorsports. I believe this is the part number right here, 7717. They're like, they're called Junkyard LS 7 lifters. So hopefully these will be good enough. They're not crazy expensive lifters. They're not like Johnson lifters or anything, but after the whole situation with Peter's lifters destroying themselves. These are the same lifters he has in his car now, so hopefully they'll be good enough for what I'm trying to do. I think I'm just gonna slick them up in some oil and then throw them in the motor, and that's pretty much gonna be the last thing that I'm gonna be able to do immediately with the motor. Alright guys, so this is gonna do it for part 1 of the engine build. As you can see right here, we got the complete short block done, plus maybe a little bit extra depending on what you actually count a short block. We got the valley cover on and the lifters in it. But anyways, stay tuned for part 2. We're going to be taking care of assembling the cylinder heads. I'm going to be showing you guys how to do a valve spring upgrade, how to upgrade the rocker arm, do a trunnion upgrade on the rocker arms, and then we're going to be putting together the rest of the top end of this motor. So be sure to subscribe and keep watching for more race car stuff.